They said I was worthless because I couldn't see. My own blood sold me like cattle to a man 3 times my age. I stood at that altar, seconds from a life of darkness within darkness. Then he walked in. The man who would show me that vision has nothing to do with eyes. This is my story, and I promise you, it will change how you see everything. Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. If you believe in karma, if you believe that good people still exist in this world, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's proof that sometimes the universe conspires to save you when you've lost all hope. Turn on those notifications, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, to a small village where I learned that darkness isn't about what you can't see. It's about what others refuse to see in you. My name is Adana. It means father's daughter, though I barely remember the man who gave me that name. He died when I was young, leaving me with a stepmother who saw me as nothing more than a burden she never asked for. I've been blind since I was 7 years old. A fever swept through our village, and when it finally released its grip on me, the world had gone black. But here's what they never understood. Losing my sight sharpened everything else. I could weave baskets so perfect that women from neighboring villages would request them specifically. I could identify every person in our compound by the sound of their footsteps. My stepmother's shuffling gait, heavy with resentment. My 3 stepbrothers, always running, always laughing at jokes I was never included in. I could cook meals by smell and touch that made people close their eyes in appreciation. Though the irony of that was never lost on me. I had dreams once, small dreams, quiet dreams. I dreamed of a husband who would speak to me kindly, children whose voices would fill my darkness with light, a home where I wasn't reminded daily that I was less than nothing. But in my village, a blind woman wasn't seen as a potential wife. I was seen as a curse. My stepmother, Folake, made sure everyone knew it. She would tell anyone who would listen that I was the reason for every misfortune that befell our family. Crops failed, Adana's curse. Livestock died, Adana brought bad luck. The well ran dry? Clearly, it was because they were burdened with a blind girl who contributed nothing. Except I did contribute. I worked harder than anyone, trying to prove my worth. I would wake before dawn, feeling my way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. I kept our compound cleaner than it had ever been. I took on every task they gave me and invented new ones just to show I deserved the space I occupied. But it was never enough. How could it be? They had decided my value before I ever had a chance to prove it. I remember one night, pressed against the thin wall of our home, I heard my stepmother talking to her sons. Her voice was cold, calculating. That blind girl is 24 now. No man will marry her for love, but perhaps someone will take her out of desperation. We need to find a way to be rid of her and benefit from it. Those words cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. I cried silently that night, as I had so many nights before, wondering what I had done to deserve a life where even my own family wished I didn't exist. Everything changed 3 months before my 25th birthday. A man came to our village, a man whose name was whispered with fear, Chief Okonkwo. He was 68 years old, wealthy from businesses nobody quite understood, and he was looking for a wife. His 4th wife, to be precise. The first 3 had all disappeared under mysterious circumstances. One was said to have run away. Another died from a fall. The 3rd simply vanished, and nobody asked questions, because Chief Okonkwo's money spoke louder than anyone's conscience. I heard him arrive before anyone told me he was there. Heavy footsteps, the kind that come from a man who's used to making the ground beneath him submit. His breathing was labored, rattling. He smelled of expensive cologne, trying to mask something rotten underneath. And his voice, when he finally spoke, made my skin crawl. It was the voice of a man who had never been told no, who saw people as possessions to be acquired and discarded. He didn't come to see me. He came to negotiate with my stepmother. I wasn't part of the conversation about my own fate. I was the product being appraised from a distance. I learned later that he had offered an enormous bride price, enough to clear all of our family's debts and leave them with money to spare. My stepmother accepted before the sun set that day. When she finally told me, there was no gentleness in her delivery, no acknowledgement that she was sentencing me to a living death. "You should be grateful," she said, her voice sharp with irritation at my tears. "A man of Chief Okonkwo's status is willing to take you despite your condition. You will marry him in 2 weeks. Finally, you'll be useful to this family." I tried to run. Of course I tried to run. But where does a blind woman run to in a village where everyone knows everyone? Where tradition is law and a woman's voice means nothing? My stepbrothers caught me before I made it past the compound gates. They dragged me back, their grip bruising my arms, laughing as if my terror was entertainment. They locked me in a small room for 3 days, bringing me only water and scraps of food. I could hear life continuing outside my prison. Children playing, women gossiping, the normal rhythms of a village that had decided my fate and moved on. Only one person showed me kindness in those dark days. Naneka, an elderly neighbor who had always treated me with gentleness, somehow managed to sneak me proper food. She held my hand through the gap under the door and whispered, "I'm praying for a miracle, child. Don't give up. God sees you even if these people don't." The morning of the wedding, they pulled me from that room and began to prepare me like a sacrifice. Rough hands scrubbed my skin, pulled my hair into painful braids, and dressed me in fabric that felt expensive, but might as well have been chains. I could smell the perfume they doused me in, floral and overwhelming, as if they could mask the scent of my despair. They draped jewelry around my neck that felt heavy with the weight of my imprisonment. The whole time no one spoke to me. As a person, I was a doll being dressed for display. My stepmother's voice was cheerful, victorious. She had finally found a way to profit from the daughter she never wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was her most valuable asset only when she could sell me away. They led me to the ceremony space in the center of the village. I could hear the crowd gathered, the whispers, the uncomfortable shuffling of people who knew what was happening was wrong, but would do nothing to stop it. Traditional drums played, a mockery of celebration. The smell of palm wine and roasted meat filled the air, a feast funded by the price of my freedom. And then I heard him, Chief Okonkwo's voice, rough and possessive, greeting guests as if this was a legitimate union instead of a purchase. He came close to me, his breath hot and sour on my face. "You're mine now," he whispered, words meant only for me. "You'll learn quickly what that means." Terror flooded through me, so completely that my legs nearly gave out. The ceremony began. Words in our traditional language that should have been beautiful, but sounded like a death sentence. I stood there, frozen, my mind retreating to some place far away, because staying present in that moment was unbearable. Then everything stopped. I heard it before anyone else, the sound of expensive vehicles approaching fast, kicking up dust and stones. Multiple engines, the kind that come with luxury cars that never visit villages like ours. Doors slammed. Footsteps approached with purpose and authority. And then a voice rang out, clear and commanding, cutting through the ceremony like lightning through darkness. "Stop this immediately." The voice was deep, educated, and carried the kind of powers that made everyone freeze. I didn't know who he was, but something in his tone made my heart hammer in my chest for an entirely different reason than fear. This was someone who was used to being obeyed, but unlike Chief Okonkwo, there was no cruelty in his authority. There was something else, something that felt almost like righteousness. Chaos erupted around me. Chief Okonkwo's voice rose in anger, demanding to know who dared interrupt his wedding. My stepmother's shrill protests joined the cacophony, but that voice, that stranger's voice, remained calm and utterly unbending. "My name is Chukwudi Nwosu," he said, and I heard people gasp. Even I had heard that name. Everyone in Nigeria had heard that name. He was the CEO of Nwosu Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Africa. A billionaire whose family had built an empire on healthcare innovation. What was he doing in our small village? I'm here overseeing a rural healthcare initiative, he continued, answering the question everyone was thinking. And I've been informed about what's happening here. Chief Okonkwo, I know exactly who you are and what happened to your previous wives. This isn't a wedding. This is human trafficking. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Chief Okonkwo sputtered, threatened, tried to use his local influence. But Chukwudi was unmoved. I heard papers rustling, a phone being held up. I have documentation here of investigations into your activities. I have statements from families. And I have lawyers on speed dial who would be very interested in this situation. The crowd murmured, the tide shifting. My stepmother jumped in, her voice greedy and defensive. He paid the bride price. The transaction is complete. You can't just take what's been purchased. Her words, reducing me to an object, to a transaction, should have hurt. But I was beyond hurt now. I was suspended in a moment of impossible possibility, listening to this stranger fight for me when my own family had sold me. Then he did something no one expected. He spoke directly to me. What's your name? His voice had softened, but lost none of its strength. Adana, I whispered, my voice hoarse from days of crying. Adana, he repeated, and the way he said it made my name sound like something precious. I can't make choices for you. I can only offer you one. Come with me now, and I promise you'll never be anyone's property. Or stay and face whatever comes. But this decision is yours alone. My stepmother immediately started screaming. She has no choice. The bride price is paid. She belongs to Chief Okonkwo. My stepbrothers joined in, mocking me. Who would want a blind woman except as a servant? You'll end up begging on streets if you leave. Their cruelty, their absolute certainty that I was worthless, finally broke something inside me, not my spirit, their hold on my spirit. I found my voice. After 24 years of being silenced, dismissed, and devalued, I found my voice. I choose to go with him. The words came out stronger than I expected. I choose freedom. I heard Chukwudi move closer, felt his presence beside me. May I take your hand? He asked, and the fact that he asked permission made tears stream down my face. I reached out and his hand enclosed mine. It was warm, steady, and in that moment, it felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. You're safe now, he said quietly. I've got you. His security team formed a barrier around us. Chief Okonkwo was shouting threats. My stepmother was demanding compensation. The village elders were paralyzed, caught between tradition and the reality of who Chukwudi was. But none of it mattered, because we were moving, walking away from that ceremony, away from that life. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand, but his hand never wavered, steady and sure, guiding me towards something I couldn't see, but desperately wanted to believe in. The drive to Lagos was the longest journey of my life. I sat in a vehicle more comfortable than anywhere I had ever been, the sound of the engine smooth and quiet, so different from the chaos we'd left behind. Chukwudi sat beside me, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel his presence. He explained everything calmly. He had a guest house on his estate where I would stay. I would have my own space, my own room, staff who would help me adjust. He asked about my needs, about what would make me comfortable. Every question was asked with such genuine care that I kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when his true intentions would be revealed. Nobody did something like this without expecting something in return. But that moment never came. When we arrived at his estate, I was overwhelmed by the sheer space of it. I could tell from the echo of sounds, the way air moved, that this was a place of enormous wealth. Staff member greeted us with respect, but Chukwudi immediately established boundaries. Adana is my guest and will be treated with the utmost respect. She's not a servant, not an employee, not anyone's charity case. She's someone who deserves dignity, and that's exactly what she'll receive here. I was shown to a suite that had more space than my entire family's home. A woman named Blessing was assigned as my personal attendant, but she introduced herself as a friend, not a servant. She walked me through every room, letting me touch and explore until I could build a map in my mind. She described colors and views, painted pictures with words of gardens, and fountains I would never see, but could imagine. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I kept waiting for someone to burst through the door, for this dream to shatter, but instead there was a gentle knock, and Chukwudi's voice asking if he could speak with me. We sat on the terrace of my suite, and he told me his story. He had lost his parents in a car accident when he was 19. They had built Nwosu Pharmaceuticals from nothing, driven by a desire to make healthcare accessible. When they died, he inherited everything, along with a grief so profound he thought it would destroy him. I learned something in that darkness, he said, his voice reflective. Wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve a purpose beyond yourself. My parents taught me that everyone has value, that everyone deserves a chance. When I heard about your situation, I couldn't walk away. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Days turned into weeks. Chukwudi kept his word about everything. I owed him nothing. I was free to leave whenever I wanted. But why would I leave? For the first time in my life, I was learning what it meant to be valued. He arranged for top doctors to evaluate my eyes. They confirmed what I already knew. The damage was permanent. But instead of treating this as bad news, Chukwudi simply nodded and said, "Then we adapt." He brought in specialists to teach me advanced mobility skills. He provided audiobooks, had his staff describe movies and shows so I could enjoy them. He introduced me to music in ways I had never experienced, taking me to private concerts where I could feel the vibrations of instruments. But the most precious thing he gave me was his time. Every evening, we would sit on that terrace and talk. He would tell me about his day, ask about mine, share his dreams for expanding healthcare access across Africa. And I would tell him things I had never told anyone. My dreams, my fears, my thoughts about a world I experienced so differently from everyone else. He never pitied me. He never treated my blindness as something to overcome or fix. He simply saw me, really saw me, in a way that had nothing to do with eyes. I felt myself changing, blooming in the warmth of genuine kindness. And somewhere in those evening conversations, somewhere between his laughter and his moments of vulnerability, I fell in love. 3 months after he rescued me, Chukwudi asked if we could take a walk through his gardens. It was evening, and he described how the sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. We sat by a fountain, and I could hear the water dancing over stones, feel the mist on my skin. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could sense he was gathering courage. This man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was nervous. "Adana," he finally said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that you're under no obligation to feel the same way. You owe me nothing, but I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't tell you the truth." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I've fallen in love with you, not despite who you are, but because of who you are, your strength, your grace, your spirit that survived, despite everything they tried to take from you. You've changed me, made me better, made me want to be the kind of man worthy of you." Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in my life, they were tears of joy. "How?" I whispered. "How can you love someone you have to lead everywhere? Someone who can't even see your face?" His hand cupped my cheek gently, and his voice was fierce with emotion. "Adana, you've been leading me since the moment I heard your voice at that ceremony. Leading me toward becoming better, toward understanding what truly matters. And as for seeing my face, you see me better than anyone with perfect vision ever has. You see my heart, my intentions, my soul. That's the only seeing that matters." He proposed then, asked me to marry him not as a rescue but as a true partner. He described the life we could build together, the foundation we could create to help women like me, the difference we could make. And I said yes. I said yes to love, to partnership, to finally believing that I deserved both. Our wedding was nothing like that nightmare ceremony. It was held in Lagos, elegant, and filled with people who genuinely celebrated our union. For the first time, I met my biological father's relatives, who had been searching for me for years after losing contact when my father died. They wept with joy, apologizing for not finding me sooner. The ceremony was covered by media, and our story spread across the country. People called me Queen Adana, a title that had nothing to do with royalty and everything to do with resilience. I became a symbol of something I had never intended to be, proof that your worth isn't determined by how others see you. But the story doesn't end with a wedding. Karma, as it turns out, has impeccable timing. 2 months after we married, Chief Okonkwo was arrested. The investigation Chukwudi had mentioned wasn't a bluff. Evidence of fraud, abuse, and worse came to light. The man who thought his money made him untouchable learned that justice, when properly pursued, doesn't care about your bank account. My stepmother and stepbrothers faced their own reckoning. They tried to sue Chukwudi for compensation for their lost bride price. When that failed, spectacularly in court, they lost everything pursuing a case they could never win. Desperate and broke, they eventually showed up at our estate, begging for money. Chukwudi left the decision to me. I could have turned them away without a word. Instead, I agreed to meet them, with my husband by my side. I heard my stepmother's voice, humbled now, full of false sweetness. Adana, we're family. Surely you can help us in our time of need. For a moment, I was that frightened girl again, the one who believed she deserved nothing. But then I felt Chukwudi's hand squeeze mine, reminding me of who I had become. You taught me a valuable lesson, I said calmly. You taught me that I had no value, that I was worthless, that I deserved to be sold to the highest bidder. I've learned you were wrong about all of that, but I've also learned that actions have consequences. You made your choices. Now live with them. I forgive you because holding on to anger would only hurt me, but I won't help you, just as you wouldn't help me. They left, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Chukwudi and I poured our energy into building something meaningful. We established a foundation dedicated to helping disabled women, providing education, skills training, and protection from exploitation. I became a speaker, traveling to villages and cities, telling my story not for sympathy, but to ignite change. I wanted every woman who had been told she was worthless to know that their value exists independent of anyone else's recognition of it. The blindness that was supposed to be my curse became my platform. I could speak to experiences that sighted people never considered, advocate for accessibility and dignity in ways that came from lived truth rather than theoretical understanding. My life now is beyond anything I could have imagined in that locked room, waiting for a wedding that would have destroyed me. I wake up in a home filled with love. Chukwudi still describes sunsets to me, paints pictures with words of a world I experience through sound, touch, and smell. We're talking about starting a family, about raising children who will be taught from birth that everyone has value regardless of ability. I've learned that vision has nothing to do with eyes. My family was blind to my worth. Chief Okonkwo was blind to his own cruelty. But Chukwudi saw clearly from the moment he walked into that ceremony. He saw a woman worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Your worth is not determined by what others refuse to see in you. The people who should love you most might be the blindest of all, but somewhere out there, someone will see you clearly, will recognize your value, will fight for you the way you deserve. And until that person comes, you fight for yourself. You survive. You refuse to believe the lies that others tell you about your value. Because I promise you, those lies say everything about them and nothing about you. If my story moved you, if it made you believe in second chances and karma and love that sees beyond the surface, smash that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been made to feel worthless, someone who's forgotten their own value. Subscribe and turn on notifications because everyone deserves stories where the good people win, where karma is real, where love conquers cruelty. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in my position? How do you define your own worth when the world tells you you have none? Remember this, the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. I was supposed to be worthless. Instead, I became a queen, not because someone rescued me, but because I chose to save myself the moment I took that offered hand and walked toward freedom. This is Adana, and this is my truth. Thank you for listening.